My name is Wes Heifel. I'm with Heifel Custom Woodworks, and today I am talking about cutting dovetails. Um, Normally, I either cut dovetails all by hand or all by like a lead dovetail jig, but today I'm kind of doing a mix of hand cutting and machine cutting dovetails on thick lumber. All right, so what I have here is I went to Home Depot and I got a Doug fir 4x4, non-pressure treated, just regular old Doug fir 4x4 for a couple of reasons. What I'm building is going to be a mechanical veneer press, and I need a lot of strength and a lot of heft. And so Doug fir is fairly strong, so that's one reason I got it. And it's also thick, and this was cheap. And so let's see how this is going to go. This is going to be this is one corner of the frame I've started to cut, and it's going to have another cross piece going across the top with veneer screws coming down through it to act as a mechanical vise. So I'm cutting big giant dovetails in this 3.5 inch thick Doug fir for a nice strong joint. And today I'm going to talk about just kind of go through my process in cutting these dovetails. So the first step, which I'll try and make another segment to show this, is I cut tails first. So I've laid out the tails and I've cut these. I've made the cuts on the bandsaw because this stuff's too deep this direction for my Dozuki kind of handsaw. So I cut these cuts and these on the bandsaw, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the waste, chop out the waste using chisel and mallet, and that's what I'll show you next. Okay, so here I've got my tail piece. I already have the relief cuts coming down the tails cut, and I've got the shoulder cuts done here. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop out the waste using mallet and chisel. All right. Again, this is thick stuff. You know, it's a lot easier on 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch stuff like you're doing drawers, but today I'm making thicker dovetails. Okay, so part of the layout process, which again, hopefully I will be able to make a video for later, is when I'm doing the layout. All right, I'm using a circle cutter or a marking gauge, a wheel style marking gauge, and when I'm laying out these shoulder cuts here, this is the depth of the mating piece. Okay, so the piece that's going to go across like that, this is the thickness of that piece that this is set to. And when I lay it out across, when I strike my line across here, by using a marking gauge, a wheel style marking gauge that cuts a line, that has the distinct advantage when I come to chop out my waste, and then I can actually stick my chisel right in that line and know that it's registered. All right, so right now I can feel that the edge of the chisel is in that line. And I just give it a light tap, just a light tap to start, and I make sure I get the whole width of the waist. And then I'm just going to make a little bird's, I'll call it bird's mouth. Just get a little piece there, get a little shoulder. And the reason for doing this is so that when I start chopping heavy later on, see, I'm just going to establish a nice sharp shoulder now, and I'll start chopping heavy in a second. But by going light here, I'm not killing the wood and the shoulder and compressing it on the showpiece side of the dovetail. I'm just going light so that this edge right here stays nice and sharp and doesn't compress in this direction or get destroyed. The fibers don't get destroyed in this direction. So I'm gonna do this until I'm happy. that I have enough shoulder there to not look like junk later on. All right, that's probably enough. Okay, so now I'm past that little that show shoulder, let's say. I actually cock my my chisel just a few degrees so that I'm undercutting the dovetail a little bit, so that nothing in the middle is going to get in the way of my pins sitting tight. And I'll start out a little light still with my strikes, just to keep them from, so I don't mess up that shoulder. And here I need to switch to a different chisel because that big boy is too thick. I place that up there. And this goes better once I get past that initial. Again, I don't want to mess up the show side, that show face, so I'm being very careful right now. And every time I come back, I'm making sure I get that edge of that chisel right in line with the shoulder of this dovetail, okay? And I keep it angled ever so slightly, sometimes a little bit more slightly. Okay, so I'm, roughly halfway through, and I leave my last strike across the shoulders. So when I come in from the other side, I've already cut those fibers down in there. So when I come in from the other side, it'll just kind of cut and break and not blow out too bad. It always blows out some, but. All right, now I'm gonna do the same process from this side. All right, there it goes. That last piece just blew out. And since I cut it from the other side before I flipped it over, it didn't do too bad. on the interior. There you go. That's hand chopping out the waste for the dovetails. Now these are pretty big dovetails, bigger than I normally do, but and it looks like there's just a little waste that's going to be a problem right there in the middle. So while I'm here, I'm going to take care of that. Just make sure that that gets that cut down so that it does not interfere with the pin when I go to fit these together. And while I'm here, if I see any other waste, any other parts that are kind of in the way, clear those out. That looks pretty good. All right, there you go. So now I'll show you how I mark out the pin side using the tails as the guide. Okay, so here we're going to I'm going to mark out the pins using the tails that I just cut. Okay, so first step is I need to know the distance that the pin board is going to that the tails are going to go down the pin board. All right, so I'm going to take my wheel marking gauge, I set it up on here on the tailboard thickness, and I drag it back so that the wheel is just ever so slightly overhanging the thickness. All right, now this will give me, what this will do is it'll make that the pin board, when it goes across this direction, will protrude past the tail just however far I overshot that measurement on the marking gauge. And that will allow me to plane off or sand off or whatever the ends of the pins, which is a heck of a lot easier than trying to, if it was short, then I'd have to bring down the entire tailboard to the ends of the pins. By overshooting so that it's long, I only have to bring down the pins. And trust me, that's a lot easier. So now I got this measurement with my marking gauge. I verify that the wheel is overhanging the edge just ever so slightly. So I can put that aside. And make sure I've got the right end. So I'm going to talk about the triangle marking system. I guess this is now this is as good a time as any. So when you want to keep track of your parts, all right, this is going to be my left side, this is my right side, this is another frame I'm doing as well. I mark them so that with a triangle, so that the triangle peak points to the top. I've got a left, I got a right and a left, okay? And the side that has the triangle, this is the face side. All right, so I can pick up any piece that's marked this way. I can pick up any piece that's marked this way and know how it's arranged and which one it goes to. This one, you'll notice, does not have the extra line. So there's a mate to this that does not have the extra line. So I can pick up a pile of pieces, find the mate very quickly and easily, and know that this one is the left and the other one that does not have the line is the right. On those other two pieces that you saw, they each have a single line. If I was doing a third frame, I would mark it the same, but it would have two lines. Now, on the ones that go across, let's see. I do a similar triangle marking system. Okay, so here, these are the pin boards for one of the frames that I have not marked yet. All right, so I'm going to take a pencil. I'm going to decide which one's going to be the top and which one's going to be the bottom. All right, so on the tailboard, it's the left and right. On here, it's going to be the top and bottom. So I've already decided that this one's going to be my top piece, this one's going to be my bottom piece, this will be my front, and this will be my front. So then I take this, and this has to match the one with a single line. So I already have a pair of these that are matched to match this side that does not have a single line, okay? So this one's going to be for the other set that does have a single line. So I'll mark this with a triangle spanning across the joint. Now to get my single line, so I know that it's a pair, it goes with a set that already has a single line, I just pick a side and I draw a line like that. All right, so now if I go in a pile and I pick this piece out, I know that this is the front face, this is the top board. There's going to be a matching board somewhere that has the bottom half of the triangle, and I can match them up because they each have this extra line across it. And I'll know that this goes with the tail pieces that also have an extra line across it. And so I can put these pieces down in a pile and not worry about getting them mixed up because of the triangle marking system. Okay, so this is the bottom piece, bottom frame piece for the set that does not have a single line. I already marked this one previously. So first thing I need to do is I need to figure out which corner I'm marking up. So on this guy, these are the tails we just cut. This is the bottom left corner. Bottom left corner right here. Okay? So here, this is the bottom left corner because this is the face. Bottom left corner. So I'm going to take my wheel marking gauge and I'm going to mark, on the pin piece, I've only got to mark the parts that are going to get cut out with the waste, which is not the face side. It's the side that's to the interior and the side that's to the exterior, like the bottom and the top. So put that, let's see, put this on here, and I'll just mark across that face and that face. All right, so now I've got to get my tails marked onto the end of my pin piece. So what I'm going to do is, this is the face, all right? So my pin piece will come up like this to the underside of this tailboard, all right? So I'm actually going to put this here. I'm going to bring my pin board, make sure I've got the right side. I can check my triangles, all right? Can you see the triangle there? This is the face, this is the left corner. That's the face, this is the bottom left corner. And what I'm going to do, this is hard to do on video, I'm actually going to bring my pin board up above the surface of my workbench just a hair, all right? I'm going to tighten it down, this clamp down just a little bit. And now I'm going to just bump it down until my tailboard is sitting on the workbench, and this is flush with the underside of the tailboard. All right, so I can get a good clean mark. On all my tails. This is easier if you're not doing video. All right. All right, so I want to make sure, got to make absolutely sure that my tailboard is, the corners of my tailboard are lined up with my pin board, and that it's oriented correctly in this direction and that it's square. These are all very important things to make sure of. So I am going to use a square, get it lined up. Now this square is touching this face of the pin board, and it's touching the face of the tailboard. All right, that's good. And I'm going to look down and I'm going to sight by eye that the shoulders of my tailboard are lined up with the face, that interior face of the pin board. And I should have a little bit of protrusion right here, so the ends of the tails are sticking past the end of the pin board, just a hair, and they are, I can feel it. So now, without moving the tailboard, I'm going to push down on it to keep it in place. I'm going to take a marking knife and I'm going to trace the tails. Each one very carefully. Now on a big thick timber like this, it's very hard to reach and see what you're doing. On thinner, like stock for drawers or a box or something, that's a lot easier. Okay, now by using a knife, I have a knife groove in the ends of the pin board. I can take a very thin mechanical pencil, I think this is what, 0.5 millimeter, and I can stick the lead in that, the mark that the knife made, and I can drag it carefully, make sure I follow the knife mark. That's not following the knife mark. I can drag it down so I can actually see where the line is. Now if I was cutting these by hand, all right, I'd use that knife mark. You could use that knife mark to try and get your saw starting in it, but really it's just a nice sharp edge. Way more accurate than using a pencil in there. It does take an extra step. Okay, so now let's get this out of the way. Whoops. You can see I've laid out the tails in the end of the pin board. Now I'm going to, which way is this? I'm going to bring square lines down to the shoulder that I made the use on the marking gauge before. Let's get this on camera. Alright, so hopefully you can see this. So now hopefully you can see I've got the square shoulders of the pins, and so what this will be is that will be waist, that will be waist that I'll cut out. And since this stuff's so big, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to make these cuts on the bandsaw. and then I'll chop it out just like I did for the tails using mallet and chisel. All right, so there you go. Now I can go to the bandsaw and cut that waste out. So now I'm going to cut the pins on the bandsaw. So first thing I'm going to do is take my bevel gauge and I'm going to set it to the same angle as that, as the sides of the pins, as the same as a dovetail. Make sure it matches. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so got the angle of the bandsaw blade matching the sides of the tails, angle of the tails. All right, now I've got to flip the angle of the blade to cut the other side of the pins. Okay, I've got the bandsaw table tilted to the same angle on the other side. Now I'm going to cut the other shoulders. Okay, now it's time to chop out the waist on the pin board, and this is exactly like chopping it out on the tail board, except that the waist is a different shape. Lock it in place. Find the right size chisel. Ooh. Yeah, I'll use that. Get your mallet. Now you may have noticed I use a carver's mallet. The reason I use a carver's mallet is that I can do this. That's really it. And I don't have to worry about which side I'm hitting with. I just pick it up and hit. And this is solid enough, it can do what I need done. I'm not trying to chop out mortises on timber frames, although this is getting mighty close.
Now you can push
that out. Sometimes if the wood's not being cooperative, you tap it with a hammer or a mallet, excuse me, ever so lightly. So if this wood was not being cooperative, just give it light taps. There you go. Now we can chop out the bulk of the waste with more vigor. And again, slight angle on that chisel. And what I'm doing, I put the tip of my chisel in that bird's mouth that I just did. Get that tip in there, and I roll it a little bit, and I'm making sure that I'm pulling back so that the back side of the chisel is against that bird's mouth. And putting the tip right on where the line was before I chiseled it out. And I do that the whole way down, registering the back side of the chisel against that edge right here, and it just gets easier and easier as you go down. Oh, there you go. That's what you gotta look out for. All right. Now, fortunately, this is gonna be on the inside where you're not gonna see that. So I got lucky. On the pin side, on the pin board, when you're chopping out this narrow side waste, as it starts to get further and further down, if you pop it all out all at once, it wants to blow out these corners. And so that's something to watch out for. And so what I usually do is I angle my chisel so I'm not popping the whole thing straight across. I'm kind of making a pyramid triangular wedge shape that'll come out halfway, and most of the time that doesn't damage these tender corners here. These aren't as, it's not as important in the middle, but on the ends, you'll see it if you blow this out. You'll end up seeing that if it gets blown out. So try to protect that. And I'll only go down so far before I flip the board over and chisel out from the other side. The other side, when this side's up, this is wider, so as I pop this out, it's got a wider space to go through, and you don't have to worry. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna do this triangular. I'm gonna turn my chisel on an angle and chop out this waste on more of a triangle so that it's got somewhere to go. I want to watch out as I don't want to blow that out with my chisel itself. And I come back and I get the other part. Get rid of that waste. I probably won't go a whole lot further before I flip my piece over. All right, so I leave this side with that chisel, having chiseled the waste one last time there. And we'll flip it over. Okay, so this segment is going to be on fitting the dovetails together. All right, so I've cut this set of pins off camera. I cut these tails off camera. Now I need to make them actually fit. I trace them, but it never goes together exactly right on the first shot when you do it by hand. So you can see triangle mark. This is the bottom right corner, and this triangle mark, can you see right there? Hopefully you can see that. That is bottom right corner. So when I go to fit these together, you know, that's about as far as it gets before it starts to bind. So now I've got to pare down the pin board. I always pare the pins to make it fit the tails. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, where is it? We use a carpenter's pencil to put some black marks on the leading edge of the tails, all right? So that as it starts to enter, you can see where it's rubbing as it starts to enter the pins. So I just take a carpenter's pencil and get all sides of the leading edge of the tails marked up like this. You gotta do the insides too. All right, so you see I've got those leading edges marked up. So now when I try to insert my pins, make sure it's oriented correctly. Where it's rubbing should transfer marks to the pins. Right there, you can see where it's rubbing on that spot. Let's see, we got a little bit right in there. We have some in here, okay, and virtually none on this one. So now what I do is I pare off wherever it's black, wherever those marks got transferred. I just take my chisel and I pare the black off. All right, I'll move that so you can see. So it's that. Come over here. Okay, so pair that and try again. And we get a little further. And you can see we've got some new marks. I'll pair those off. Sometimes you got to freshen up your marks. Okay, so I skipped ahead. I've done the pairing on the pins, and we've got the tails to fit on there nice and snug. Honestly, for this purpose, I probably don't even need glue. So there you go. Once I do glue it up, this will get paired so it's flush. There's a little bit of the pins are a little bit proud, just as I wanted. The tails are just a little bit proud of the pins, just as I wanted, so I can pin those end grains down so it's flush and make it nice and pretty. So there you go. That's hand cutting dovetails, or at least hand chopping the waist out of the dovetails, and I use the bandsaw for cutting the cheek cuts on my pins and my tails, because this stuff is so big. All right, big old 3.5 inch or so. And I'll try and include a spot, maybe a little shot of the finished product later on in this video. And I will try to maybe see if I can get a shot of the layout for the dovetails, for the tail parts at least. So I showed you the pins, marking the pins from the tails. The dovetails really aren't that hard, but it's just something I should probably show. Thank you.